Hello, and thank you again for joining me on another episode of What Sayeth the Crooked Nose. So today, I think that you're going to see an interesting conversation, likely around dreams, what we can do when we allow our dreams to feel as real as the waking world. And regardless, really, again, I just want you to watch and see where the conversation goes. A mentor of mine, Jordan Peterson, not because we're homies, but because I love his work, really talks about that if you don't find somebody interesting, you're probably not listening hard enough. And really, I just want you to show what can happen when you authentically approach a conversation with somebody who has the potential to be radically interesting and just see where it goes. Just follow it and allow the conversation to be something organic and really take its own path, have a life of its own. And I suspect that, I will be rewarded for it because I certainly enjoy these. And I certainly hope that you will as well by being a fly on the wall and watching this conversation unfold. Thank you again for joining me. And as always, let's have love and truth always guide our path. Cori, thank you so much for joining me today on another episode of What Sayeth the Crooked Nose. And as I understand, you are there in London, and you may or may not know that Cameron, right? It's Scottish name that means crooked nose. And so therein
Oh,
lies,
right.
where I get the name of my podcast. So kind of a fun little, tidbit about me and a way to make it a little humorous, right? Because ultimately the podcast is like, hey, who wants to tune in and watch me pontificate, at length? But I, I try to make it a little, jovial and have a lot of fun here. So I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. And I'm glad you explained that because I'm sitting here looking at you and thinking, his nose isn't crooked,
So I have a
not any
deviated
more crooked
septum.
than anyone else's.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a deviated septum, so it's crooked from the inside. So it's even more, of a trick. Yeah.
A twisted tail.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I, perusing your Facebook page, I see that you are somebody who is big on dreams and dreaming and living that in that space where you feel that the dream has already been granted, right? The wish fulfilled. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What kind of brought you to that, and then how has that maybe made your life better?
Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. So that's this week's pontification, as you might say. Um, I've been doing years and years of personal development in addition to having more than 30 years of Buddhist practice. And what I've come to learn is that in your life, if there's something that you really feel you want, then you inhabit the space of what we call the dream. So this isn't about dreams that you dream when you go to sleep. These are about the dreams that you create in your future and the dreams that you create in the future version of yourself. So, for example, if you decide you want to have a partner or you want to have a really great job, run a really great business, be really healthy, then you imagine that future version of yourself. And in personal development jargon, we say as the wish fulfilled. Okay. So, that's what that means. What it's done for me, it's been the most fascinating journey because I there are so many things that I wanted to do. My story really is that I decided to get divorced in 2014, and I was really scared because number one, I was scared of being on my own, and number two, I was really worried about the financial ramifications. So at that time I accelerated my personal development journey, and I'm really glad I did. And I kept hearing about things like The Secret and quantum mechanics and all that kind of thing, which led me to the understanding that you can create the life you want by visualizing it or by dreaming it or by creating the dream. And so I remember early on, I was writing down in my journal, I'm walking down the beach with him. We're gazing lovingly into each other's eyes and all this stuff, right? And about the kind of person. And then I'd go to bed at night and I'd imagine this person with his arms around me. Well, it did take me 8 years, but that person is now in my life. So that's really, really interesting. And even like the most bizarre things that you couldn't possibly conjure up. Like, I had been joking with a friend a year before that I wanted to go out with an Italian. Well, guess what? He's Italian. I had been saying I'd really like to meet someone who has some of the personality traits that my youngest son has, because we get along really well. I love my other son as well, but this particular relationship was special in a way that I thought, wow, he'd be a great guy to go out with. I mean, if he wasn't my son, obviously.
Right.
Sure, lo and behold, this guy has the type of qualities like the goofiness, wanting to have fun. If I make up a stupid song or a stupid dance in the kitchen, he doesn't say, "Oh, shut up, Cori, stop being so stupid." He just bursts out laughing and enjoys me as I am. So that it happened. The other thing was in terms of income. You know, in those early days, I set an income goal, and that income goal has come to pass. And now I'm setting the next income goal. But it's not like this frantic holding on for dear life to the dream. It's like you create it, and in the beginning, you're desperately attached to it. But then you just go, you know, I'm going to just get on with enjoying my life. And that's when things suddenly come in. And I mean, I'm sure you probably want to ask another question, but the other thing is that we cannot predict the way things are going to happen, both on the career front and the relationship front. The way these things unfolded was absolutely, you couldn't make it up. You, like, seemingly out of the blue, like boom, and it's in your life. So really, I'm so fortunate that I've really understood this. And once you grasp it, it's not a whole lot to worry about.
So the idea of when you have that idea of a dream that you're focusing on, you lower the importance, but don't lower the priority.
I can tell you've done the elite mentorship forum.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
lower the importance, exactly.
yeah,
But at the time when it feels so important, that's the hardest thing to do, isn't it, Josh?
yo, for real. I remember listening to an Indian mystic by the name of Sadhguru, who, I got turned on to him through Joe Rogan. I was listening, like, I can't find a single area where this guy sounds full of it. Everything he says seems to make sense. But he did say something that challenged me pretty heavily. It was like, look, if you want to be happy, just be happy. It's like, okay, yeah, easy for an Indian mystic to say. Um, but Sadhguru led me to Peter Sage. Peter Sage took me down the journey of the Elite Mentorship Forum, and sure enough, oh my God, I've now gotten to a place where before I go to bed, I can just open up my heart to the most wonderful feeling of gratitude
Hmm.
and thankfulness and joy. And I can do the same thing in the morning. First thing when I wake up in the morning, I just open myself up. Even if I'm having a hard time sleeping, I just like, you know what? I feel amazing. And Peter,
Wow,
yeah, I know, right? Well,
that's
and
so cool.
Peter Sage had on a bonus in the USM, right? Ultimate Self Mastery. I
Hmm.
want to say it was like 8 hours of Kevin Trudeau talking. And Kevin Trudeau was like, look, if you want to manifest it into your life, well, then what you should do is, not just see the wish fulfilled, but feel it. Feel like it's
Yes,
Christmas
absolutely.
morning. Feel like tomorrow is Christmas morning and feel good and feel jovial. And I've been able to start getting myself to that point where as I start seeing that dream, like I get these joyful butterflies in my belly and I start kind of
Nice,
just laughing and giddy. Yeah, it's amazing.
nice. That's great. So even with that thing about feeling it, when I would go to sleep in my bed on my own at night, I would imagine the person's arms around me. And as you say, feel that.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely true. The other thing is this thing that I said earlier about you don't know how it's going to happen. I mean, I work for Peter Sage on his team, and that came about through a sales call.
Yeah.
that someone was selling me something. At that time I was working as a teacher of the deaf.
Mhm.
So I've had many careers over my relatively long life, and I've been really fortunate in that I always follow my crooked nose. So so I was on a sales call, and 2 days later the guy called me up and said, "You want to come and work for me?" I said, "Sure." Handed in my notice on my teaching job and started working for him.
Wow. And what is it that you do?
I work as we're called success coaches, but basically it's sales. We sell people onto Peter Sage's programs,
Okay.
and we coach. We do take people through a coaching process. In fact, which EMF were you on,
But I was
Josh?
17 was my cohort.
Oh, right. So you would have spoken to a success coach. I wonder who
Yeah.
your success coach was.
I think they left. I don't think that they're part of the organization anymore. They may have gone on to, greater lands. I'm not really sure.
Mm,
But I do recall that when I first got introduced to Peter Sage, it was a YouTube video, and I saw him be like, "Hey, what if I could tell you why you procrastinate?" I was like, "Huh, well, that sounds interesting." So I started listening to him. I was like, "Well, this British chap sounds like he knows me, like intimately. What the hell is going on here?" So then tuned into his I turned into his webinar, and then 3 hours of webinars later, right? I ended up joining EMF and USM at the same time. And what was interesting is up to this point, so I feel like Sadhguru really had the beacon of light that then
mhm.
led me to Peter Sage. And in April of last year is when I started watching those webinars. And then Sadhguru recommended I go to Devil's Tower. Not necessarily me, but it was on one of his videos saying that it's got the most throat chakra energy he's ever felt in his life. And I mean, like, I'm a dude raised in Utah. What do I know about chakras? So
Mhm.
I was like, hey, you know what? This guy seems to know a lot more than I do. I am somebody who's capable of speaking. I love to share ideas and play with them and, create, wonderful
Yep.
visualization. So throat chakra seems like something that would be right up my alley. And he said to do it, on a full moon because it's just, powerful energy. And so I took him up on it. And it's a 9-hour road trip from where I am. And on the way there, I was listening to some straight talks, and Peter Sage has these straight talks that can be from an hour to 2 hours, where he really unpacks one, main area, something that I'm sure that you're aware of, but this is more for, any guests who are watching this interaction between us. And so I just listened to them as I was driving there, and I left it to I left the experience to thinking like, you know what, I'm going to commit myself to this 9-hour drive there, 9-hour drive back, and I may get nothing out of it other than just knowing that I'm able to commit to something like this and feel good about myself. And sure enough, when I was there, it was incredible. I felt legit magic. Like Peter has these different
Wow.
levels of consciousness, and I felt a moment of as me, not just through me, but as me. Like I felt the wind. I was responding as the wind was picking up. My thoughts were crescendoing and just going. And as the wind was dropping, so were my thoughts. And I was one for about an hour just meditating. And it was phenomenal. I haven't quite been able to get there again, but it helped me understand, like, you know what, I'm onto something. And this Peter Sage guy, right? This this nice British chap, it seems like he's leading me on a journey that I've never experienced before in my life, and I'm super excited to see where it goes.
That's cool. That's cool. So the other thing that I do is which is relevant to this conversation, is that I'm a trainer. I'm an elite mentorship trainer. So
Oh, fantastic.
I've just started running my second cohort. It started on the 14th of January, and I'm running it with a guy called Nick Bell,
Yeah.
who's, do you know Nick?
I saw him on Millionaire Business School. I'm going to have a conversation with him later to see if maybe doing a podcast like this with him might be
He will
an
definitely,
option.
yeah, I'm sure he'd love to do it. And I'll send him a message that we've done this. And yeah, so we work very, very closely together. We're very good friends. And yeah, my first cohort I ran on my own. That was a great learning experience, but I learned that it's really nice to have an ally And we have two community managers who are also trainers, Joyce Taylor and Christian Woods. So
I know Joyce.
you do. She's lovely.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She's so nice. She was my community manager in my first one, but you know it really was like I was running the show and she was kind of helping me out. Whereas on this particular group, where she's playing a pivotal role. But I'm curious because you mentioned about being an ASME, and my concern for people who listen to the podcast is, are people going to know what that is?
Probably not. I do hope that it actually gives them a little bit of curiosity, but I appreciate the question, and to unpack that a little bit. Well, actually, hey, you're the trainer. Why don't you unpack it?
Sure. I'll just give a really simplified overview, but although I'm sure you're more than capable, it's one of the things Peter talks about, and it's not unique to him, and I'm not sure where it came from, but he talks about 4 levels of consciousness, and or 4 levels of 4 ways of, let's call them ways of being. And there are to me, by me, through me, and as me. To me is briefly described as the victim state, which the mantra would be, why is this happening to me? Why is everything going wrong? Why isn't anything changing? By me is, if I just work hard enough, harder, smarter, faster. So it's really the world of people like Grant Cardone, which is driving and go get them, David Goggins, that kind of thing. Which isn't to disrespect or discredit. That does have its place. And I did once ask Peter Sage the question, about coaches like that, because my son was very interested in that. And he said, well, at different ages, different things are appropriate. So it's great if it leads him in the right, I hate the word the right direction, but leads him to create a better life. And then there's through me, which is really what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, where you set the vision and the intention, and then you get into the energy of whatever it is you want. Call it the wish fulfilled again. You get into the energy, you get into the feeling, and stuff just seems to happen. And it's like almost spooky. And then as me is the recognition, but not mental recognition, the embodiment and recognition that we are all one and part of a greater whole. So it's in my lexicon, which is Buddhist, it would be the Buddha state. So that's accessible to everyone, actually, but it doesn't mean that you're going to reside there. You might go into that and out of that, and into that and out of that, as you just so beautifully described, that feeling of oneness, the oneness of everything, and the fact that we perceive separation, but that isn't really the truth of life. The truth of life is we're all one, but we're having a really fun time being humans and going around thinking that, hey, I'm an individual, which you are, but you're connected.
Yeah.
You can't think that because something's happening on the other side of the planet that you're not connected to it, because that's not true. Everything is connected.
Yeah, I totally
Job?
agree. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, what were you saying?
Did I do it justice?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think that was, very eloquent and very good, and gives a good understanding as to, that framework. And it doesn't mean that somebody is a bad person if they're into me. It just
No.
likely means that they're stunting their own growth. They're likely robbing themselves of the nutrients that they need to grow. Like if they were a beautiful plant, right? You want a good, soil system. You want good nutrients in order to be able to grow. And to me, is like being in a dry bed that is robbed of the nutrients, maybe like sand, and constantly just being beat down, and often beat down by ourselves. And that through me state, I have found that as I summon the wish fulfilled, and if nothing else, just feeling amazing. I find that people come into my world to give me reasons to feel even more amazing. and, connecting with people with high vibrations. I'm even putting on a live healing class tomorrow. Because through Peter Sage, I met Ed Stracher, if you're familiar with Ed Stracher, and he taught me how to heal. I thought he was a
Wow.
crazy person when I first heard him talk, right? Because Peter had a webinar. It was about speed reading, right? And it was like, oh, okay, speed reading, cool.
That's right.
Yep. And so he has the Reading Genius, which unfortunately is indefinitely suspended because of the Ukraine conflict right now. And there's like one of his main people on Reading Genius is in Ukraine. But he was going on about speed reading, and I was like, dude, I've seen these webinars. Like, these are like 80s, 90s webinars that I remember watching as a kid. Like, wow, what a weird turn of events. And then he just went on a full and started talking about these weird things, spiritual and domains that I didn't have any experience with. And so I thought he was a crazy person. But the entire time that I'm thinking he's a crazy person, Peter Sage was on that webinar, and I was drilling a hole through Peter's head with my eyes, just like staring at him, like, is this for real? Like, is this guy for real? And Peter just had this little smirk on his face, like he's heard it all before, didn't phase him at all. And if it weren't for Peter, there's no way in hell I would have given Ed a chance. And I'm glad that I did. Right? Peter helps me tap into my great I am when it comes to neuroscience, cognition, quantum alignment. Ed helps me tap into that I am when it comes to magical abilities and actually helping people, heal, their soul, really recharge their soul. And as a consequence of having our life force at full power, well, our body and our minds heal as a consequence. And again, this is something that sounded very silly and very crazy to me, but also I got to add, so coming back to Sadhguru, as Ed was going on doing his thing, making me think he was a crazy person, in my right ear I audibly heard Sadhguru say, life is about experience. And he always follows up with, isn't it? But he didn't this time, because it's up to me to follow up with saying, isn't it? And like, oh, that's right, life is about experience. And if Peter, who's taught me so much, who I admire so much, doesn't think that Ed's a crazy person, well, I chose Peter as a mentor for a reason. So what could Ed perhaps have for me? And quite a bit, actually.
And you found out he did.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you're a healer.
Yeah.
I didn't
Sure
know
am.
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't necessarily go out and parade it, from the rooftops. But usually when I meet people, I've been doing it's not in the UK, but there's a social media network called Alignable here, where it's business to business. I think Canada might be involved as well. But when people say, hey, tell me about what you do. Well, okay, well, my business is Toward Goodness. How I got that name, so I don't necessarily go into what I do right away. How I got that name is that I started tuning into Jordan Peterson when, my life was at the darkest it's ever been. And he said, probably the best thing I can do for myself is to create the highest ideal of goodness of which I can conceive, and then make myself worthy of it. Well, and here I am.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
And then that then led me to Sadhguru, which then led me to Peter Sage, which then led me to Ed. And then Ed and Peter Sage create like this double helix, for me in my abilities.
Fantastic. So you found your path.
Yeah. Well, what's scary about that, though, well, what's scary about, what seems like the path is that on a spiritual path, it's not like I can just get binoculars and like stare down and be like, oh, well, I can see easily 10 miles down the road. I almost feel like the path is creating itself as I'm taking that next step. And so that's really weird because it throws me outside of my paradigm, because for so many years, I needed to have control. I needed to have certainty. And now this is throwing me so outside of that certainty from the outside world, to then build that muscle of certainty within myself to be like, hey, the path has presented itself with every step. So why would I doubt it now?
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Perfect.
And so let me ask you, what would you find is maybe the greatest reward for going through as a elite mentorship trainer?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Well, clearly seeing people transform, I mean, it is just remarkable, and feeling the enthusiasm that people have, and knowing that it works. I think that's really the greatest reward. It's really that simple. And of course, when you see other people go through that, it encourages you too. So it's like a benign circle. That's really, I mean, I don't have much more else to say about it. It's really, it's just great. And, you know, I am definitely on the journey of continuous and assiduous personal growth. So I don't, you know, there's no, it's, I don't want to say relentless because that sounds very, very by me, but it is that my level of appetite for it is insatiable, you know,
Nice.
of wanting. And it's funny because even as I'm saying it and I'm listening to the language I'm using, I feel a slight concern that it can so easily lurch into this sort of a by me acquisitiveness, you know, that I have to be grabbing at all this. And actually, there is also a space for learning to allow. That's the harder place for me. That's the through me. That I feel is the next part of the journey. It's interesting because a lot of people who graduate from Peter Sage then go on to say, oh gosh, Joe Dispenza, he's pretty cool. I got to look more closely at him. And Peter will tell you that Joe Dispenza is the one who has the market on through me. That's definitely, you know, where his market are people who are already in that space or entering into that space, whereas Peter is a bit more about the transition from by me to through me. Also, it's funny because these Eckhart Tolle things keep dropping into my. I get tons of emails because I sign up for everything, which is a habit that I'm hoping to change. But you know, Eckhart Tolle keeps dropping in, and I've got this 6-month course. I nearly signed up for the live one to go out there to wherever he is in Canada in May, but I didn't. And because I really recognize that I'm a very I'm a very throat chakra person according to my human design. So I'm very vocal, very communicative. I used to be a singer. I'm really interested in communicating the message. That's the thing for me. But it's time to explore more of the feminine, what I would call the feminine, and more of the being, and moving away from the doing.
Yeah, the throat, I can see, you know, the speaking be much more yang energy. In fact, so when I went through Ed's, you know, Healing Genius protege, he nicknamed me Mr. Yang himself because I like apparently, yeah, I know, right? So he his his godson was there, Eddie. And Eddie was like blown away because like I just kept peppering Ed with all these questions and all these questions, and nobody would ask him questions. And like, I mean, I guess they'd ask one or two here and there, but like I usually have a way of asking a question which is interesting. So then you're kind of compelled to answer. And Ed is a man of few words. He really is. And I got him to answer a whole lot of questions. It got to the point where, you know, it did cause a little bit of friction, which is, hey, that's part of life, and that's perfect. So he really helped me tune into what kind of works best, and I learned a lot from that. Now, going back to what you were saying as far as, you know, different leaders, different, you know, trainers, different people in your space, whether it be through Buddhism, whether it be through Eckhart Tolle or Peter Sage or Joe Dispenza, if you could describe spirituality, what would you say spirituality means to Cori?
What does it mean? I think an easier question for me is how do I deploy it? Spirituality is connection with something that's it kind of defies words in a way. So for me, it would be that moment of connection when I'm meditating or when I'm chanting, and the degree to which I accept and embrace that as is absolutely part of my life, to be connected to something bigger. So for me, there are lots of different words and there's lots of different language people use, and most people in our society, in Western society certainly, talk about God. That's not the language I use. I might say the universe, but actually I would say life itself. So spirituality to me might mean connection with nature, connection with life itself, connection to the highest part of myself that, as I said earlier in this conversation, is connected to everything else. And in Buddhism, that is called the Buddhist state, when you are connected. Peter often talks about mind-heart coherence, that it's that. So spirituality, if you want to talk about it, what is it to be spiritual? It's to connect with that idea that there is something much bigger than our mind can fathom, and that's experiential, and that goes beyond words, you know, and that we all try and describe it, but it's really about an experience. It isn't about a definition. Does that make sense?
100%. I mean, that's I found in my dealings in my life that things spiritual often are quite ineffable, right? They don't really like to take a label, right? Like the Tao, they live in
Yeah.
obscurity. And really what was going through my head as you were describing spirituality is the idea of being connected to connectedness. And
Hmm.
I mean, that's
There you
effectively
go.
being connected to Tao, being connected to the now, to the eternal now, because now is where I have the ability to experience something. I don't have the ability to experience something later, because
Yep.
later will eventually become now. And if
Yep.
I'm always looking at later, well, then I'm always going to suspend that experience. Or if I
Yep.
decide that I can't experience because of something that happened in my past, well, now I'm robbing myself of the ability to be spiritual and of the ability to be connected now, because I've disconnected to something to the past.
Yep. And Joe Dispenza does on the Gaia platform. Joe Dispenza does a really good lecture about that, in Breaking the Habit of Being. Is it? No, it's Becoming Supernatural, I think. And he does a diagram of exactly what you said,
Mm-hmm.
that we're either in the past or we're future pacing, and actually we are robbing ourselves of the now. A few things came to mind as you were talking. That was one of them. The other was the idea that in Buddhism we talk about that cause and effect are simultaneous, that in the moment when you make a cause, the effect is already there, and that although we see it in it with all the way although it may unfold in what we perceive to be the future, that effect has already been made in the moment of causality. So I think that's a really interesting way of looking at things as well. Cause and effect are simultaneous, but we perceive them as linear and sequential. They're not. They're not.
So I
Your
like
head's
that.
gonna
I
fall
like
off.
that
I can
idea.
yeah.
Well, and I like that
Your
idea.
head was gonna fall off.
Well, and so
What's
I
she
really
talking about?
I love the idea of the simultaneity,
Hmm.
where I find myself gravitating is a lot in the philosophy of Alan Watts, where he
Hmm.
breaks down Buddhist traditions and Taoist traditions and talks about that it's not necessarily cause and effect, but it's more an arising mutually. That in the same way that,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, bees and flowers, right? You'll never see bees in a place where there aren't flowers. You'll never see flowers in a place where there aren't bees or insects to do the equivalent job. And
Mhm.
which then tells us that whatever it is that we're looking for in our lives, right? If we then summon that, well, then we'll find that it'll arise mutually to the degree that we're looking to arise. The bee and the flower arise mutually. They both come into harmony together through being connected to that connectedness. And if you break that connectedness, well, then things start falling apart. Not necessarily
Mm,
because of the necessarily cause and effect, but because the
yeah,
connectedness is now
totally
lost.
different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what else?
Well, I mean, as you say, whether on a sales call or actually taking people through a cohort as a trainer, where do you find that you're able to harness kind of that power of spirituality in your life?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I mean, before you even start talking to people, before I start talking to people, and I'm not going to put my hand on my heart and say I do this all the time, but this thing of setting the intention before the call,
Mm,
before you start the cohort, doing whatever it is you do, whether it's meditating or chanting in my case, or just imagining the outcome that you want for that person, not materially, but spiritually or emotionally, maybe materially as well. But imagining the people in your group, the person you're going to be talking to. I have I have a technique that I call heart beaming. It's just a little name I gave it, and it's where I'm just like, and it's not new. It's I'm sure you do it too, but it's sending energy. I imagine this beam of light coming out from my heart. And I do a lot of my talking through the computer, so I just send it right through the computer. That's one technique. Or another one I have is I imagine myself putting my arms around the computer, and sometimes they can't see me, so I can do that as if I'm giving them an embrace. So really anything that I can do to get myself into this state of compassion, I think you'd call it, for the other person. And compassion can be kind, and compassion can also be very direct. So I call it, a velvet slap. I'm very, very direct. So I'm not afraid to, with the permission of the person I'm talking to just tell it like it is. But it's never with the intention of being cruel. So just getting myself, it's really about raising my energy, raising my vibration, and not being pulled down, being in that elevated state. Peter talks about this too. He talks about, maybe you've come across this, and I may not remember it, but he talks about physiology, language, and I can't remember what the third one is, but that's the way you do it, is you get into that energy. What
Yeah,
is
well,
the
there's a famous TED
that?
Talk that has something on the order of like nearly 30 million views at this point, I think, where this lady's talking about how if you stand and do like the I win pose for even 2 minutes, even just 2 minutes, and just stand there and
Yeah,
just feel like I won, it
yeah,
will increase the level of testosterone, it'll decrease the level of cortisol, it'll allow you to deal with stress, and it's a wonderful thing to do before an interview, before a sales call, right? And it's the idea of changing your physiology outside, right? Smile, right? And
mm,
then you actually start changing the endorphins and the chemical hormones that are being put into the blood. And so there are ways in which we can kind of hijack our energy systems simply by putting ourselves into that space, which is kind of a way of looking at faith as well, right? I have faith that when I stand here for a couple of minutes, that I'm going to feel better. Oh my gosh, look at that. I feel better. And now when I feel better, I do better.
yep, yep, exactly. In fact, I'm casting about for my notebook because, oh, I can't, I think it's out of reach. It was physiology, language, and I can't remember the other one. But it will come back to me, right? So that's how you change. I mean, I basic, for me it's very basic. Go chant, go meditate, imagine the person, that's the main thing I do. And if I need to get up and do some jumping jacks or a cross crawl or something like that. Yeah. So that's it basically. And I think the highest level of skill that you need as a trainer is the ability to listen.
Mm,
And that's certainly the highest skill you need as a sales coach, as a salesperson. And I don't consider sales a dirty word, because I'm selling people something. I'm selling them the idea of transformation.
mhm.
I'm allowing them to come to their own decision about how I'm enabling them to come to their own decision about how badly they want to change. Do you really want a transformation? Or why are you on this call? Why are you on this call? What do what is it you really want, and how much do you want it, and why do you want it? So that's something else.
Well, people want to buy, but they don't want to be sold. And if they're going to spend their money anyway, and you take the time to do a discovery and then help them likely get top of mind something that has never been there before, you know what? That's a good question, Cori. Like, why do I want this? Well, what I think is this. And then when
Mm,
they join the program and they go through module 1, ruling your reality, you're like, oh, well, then it might start reshaping that paradigm, or adding more definition to it. And, like you said, the benign circle, well, it's almost like a revolving, right? And it goes up and up and
yes,
up.
upward spiral,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that's what Peter Sage also has a famous line that, the cry,
War
the
cry.
war cry of failure is, I've already heard that. Because we
Mm,
think that just because we've already heard it, then we already know. Well, there was a wonderful time that I like to, talk about how, even just what I think it was 2 weeks ago, I was listening to somebody talk, and they were describing, when the Pharisees approached Jesus and like, yo, bro, which one of these commandments, dog, is the best one, right? And then Jesus didn't pull from the letter of the law. He didn't say, oh, actually, here's the exact commandment that's best. Here's, 17 different references for why it's best. Well, he pulled from the spirit of the law that harmonized that. And as he was describing just, Jesus being confronted, I started thinking everything that I've been reading with Busting Loose from the Money Game, right? Which is right there with Robert Scheinfeld.
I saw that.
Yeah. And then it dawned on me. It dawned on me. Wait a minute. Busting Loose from the Money Game, phase 2. Phase 2 is being in line with that Christ consciousness. Like, whoa, hold on a second. Because Robert Scheinfeld says that when there's anything that reminds us of a limitation or makes us feel uncomfortable, well, what we do is we lean into it. We remind ourselves that this is not who we are. Our soul, our infinite self, is who we are. And this is all an illusion. And if this is all an illusion, well, then it's here to teach me a lesson. And if it's here to teach me a lesson, well, the best way to be taught a lesson is have somebody else come into my space and start interacting the script that will then be tied to that lesson. Well, and if somebody's coming into my space to interact that script, well, and that script's been handed down from my higher self. Well, Jesus said, love thy God above all else, not love Cori's God, not love Joshua's God, love thy God, which sounds very, similar to me as love thy God self. And then love your neighbor as yourself. Well, wait a minute. If these people are coming into my space with the script that I handed down to them, well, then now there's really no separation between them and me. And so
Mm,
now you start getting a little bit of that oneness, and that non-duality, which I certainly have a hard time. I can easily like intellectualize it, but it's so bizarre and it's so obscure that it's hard to truly say that you're there. But when you wrap your arms around somebody who has a lesson for you, especially from a place of projection, where when we typically project from a place of scarcity or a place of feeling less than, and if we can wrap our arms around that, well, then we are embracing the shadow. And as we're embracing our shadow self, well, now we're loving our neighbor as ourselves, because our neighbor's only teaching us a lesson that our higher self said that we need to learn.
mhm.
And I realized that not only is this book brilliant, Busting Loose from the Money Game, but I realized that he was describing in grand detail exactly what that parable meant. I don't know if he realized that, but that dawned on me simply by listening to something I've heard quite a few times. But now I was at a higher level of awareness because I had more context to apply to it. And so this is why it's very important to hear, this perhaps the same thing a few times, because then we'll find that we're no longer the same person that third time and that
Oh,
fourth time and that
definitely.
fifth
Oh
time.
my God, absolutely. I mean, how many times have you been through the Elite Mentorship Forum?
So going through it again. Thankfully, Colleen Parsons, she is, in my cohort. She spun it back up. We just started in January. So our cohort graduated last November, and
I
I
didn't
was,
know.
yeah, well, and so I was honored because I graduated Healing Genius
Mhm.
and with Ed Stracher and the Elite Mentorship Forum with Peter Sage within like 2 weeks of each other.
Cool.
Yeah. So this path really encompassed a lot for me.
Yep.
And so going through this again and going through this with my peer group and going through this with people who have a vibrancy, who want to find their best self, who want to understand what this material has to offer. Well, we find that new awareness is gleaned by covering old tracks.
It really is. But and actually, as you're talking, I'm reminded of something else, referring back to that question of what's the best thing? I don't think you asked it this way, but what's the best thing about being a trainer?
Mm-hmm.
When one of your students who's never understood something before suddenly understands it, and they are, I'm just going to say it, a man crying in your group because they've loved the experience so much. When you see someone the way someone else is feeling, it does something to you.
Yeah.
So that for me really was one of the most memorable and powerful experiences of doing EMF. Yeah. I think the other thing for me is the learning that how to not be self-critical. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. It's like, you know, you can't get it perfect, but it's perfect anyway. I mean, from one point of view, it's perfect, and from because you're learning whatever you need to learn, but from another point of view, it's like, oh, I effed that up again. I could have done that better, or maybe I really don't care enough about these people. And then observing yourself, judging yourself, and going, wait a minute, what's that about? Why are you being so harsh on yourself? So there's all that stuff that goes on as a trainer as well. So you are a student alongside all the other students. And I think one of the other trainers, Carolyn, said it best. She said, yes, I am the trainer, but this is a community. This is a community, and you are all part of this, and we all have an equal voice in this. So it's as much your efforts to engage as it is what I do as a trainer. I think that's really powerful. Another coach that I've worked with, what's his name? Blair Singer. He says the genius is in the room. I love that expression. The genius is in the room. It's not because I'm a great trainer, although, of course, the better I am at unleashing that genius in the room, of course, the better trainer I am. Better is a funny word. Again, it's loaded, isn't it? It's
Maybe
a
more
value.
effective.
More effective. Thank you. More effective. Um, I'm cautious of any of these words that good, bad, that are evaluative in that way, but more effective is really good. So yeah, the genius is in the room.
Well, and if we, at whatever level that we are a teacher or a mentor or a master to others, if we divorce ourselves from being the student, well, then we divorce ourselves from the learning process. We've now
Mhm.
said that, hey, I've learned as much as there is to learn. And then we start living in an air of haughtiness. Well, look at me. Obviously, you should learn from me because I'm just amazing. And
Yeah,
that's
that's
there,
it's
there's
a
nowhere
trap.
to go but down from that mentality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the ego is a very sneak in subtle thing.
You're right. And so what I found, how I combat that, when I have an area of opportunity, I say something silly, like when it's offline, I start thinking about like, man, that was a real area of opportunity. And I just start laughing out loud. I'll guffaw to myself because it helps me again embrace, right? And, because here was my neighbor, not necessarily them saying anything, but because my idea bounced off them. I was like, wow, that sounded like ass, right? I totally messed that up. Wow, okay, I could do a lot better next time. What was it that led to that? Well, I probably wasn't listening very well. I probably decided what the answer was before I actually listened to what their entire question was, and I just gave them something that I felt, that was important to say, as opposed to something that they needed to hear, or that
Mm,
I feel would have been productive for them to hear.
mm, mm. Yep. It's a subtle art, isn't it?
Which is spirituality in a nutshell, right? It's very subtle. It's incredibly
Yeah.
subtle. It's so subtle that you'll miss it. You blink and you miss it, and yet it's right there to be seen at anytime your eyes are open, and so that subtlety is not going to hit you upside the head with a brick, but it might come in the form of a velvet slap at times. Now there are reminders in life that maybe somebody could say it is part of the spiritual life. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Where again, Peter talks about this idea of the rumble strip, right?
Mhm.
If there's a lesson in life that you're supposed to learn because your higher self passed it down for somebody to teach you, and then you don't
Yep.
learn from it, well, at first you're gonna hit that rumble strip. Oh crap, let me get back in the middle of the lane. um, but if we don't listen to it, well, then what happens is we veer off the side of the road. And if we veer off on the side of the road,
Yeah.
and then we continue doing the same thing because we don't learn, well, next time we might actually hit a ditch, or hit a tree, or God forbid hit a person, right? And so it'll progress. Those lessons will progressively increase and increase in their intensity until we learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Such a great metaphor, isn't it? The rumble strip.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Well, and that's what's so beautiful about the way in which he teaches, is because he doesn't come from a place where it's like, hey, look at me, I'm amazing. Why don't you guys all bow down to me and look at my amazing, because I am Zod, right? Conqueror of worlds. He's just like, look, this is how it is. I'm not saying that I'm amazing. I'm just saying I've made a lot of mistakes over 30 years of doing this. And I really would love for you to learn from them and learn,
Mhm.
what I've learned, because, the master doesn't need to learn from only his mistakes. He can learn from others and be like, oh, that person fell off a cliff when they walked over there. Maybe I shouldn't walk over there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, are you a trainer yet?
No. And I like the idea of being one, but I don't know that I will be. I don't know. We'll see. I'm a healer.
Great.
Yeah. I'm a healer. And so I certainly, the path that Peter led me on brought me to a place where now I can not just heal others, but then leave them with ways in which to stay healed, right? Because if I heal them in analogous to washing their car, well, when they go drive around downtown, they go interact in the world, well, they're going to get dirt on their car. And eventually they're going to need to wash their car again. And I give them the tools now to be able to do that. So then they can stay at that state where perfect health is a natural state.
Hmm. Well, isn't that great that you found your passion?
Yeah. Right. In a very unexpected place, which also is quite spiritual. I mean, expected but unexpected. Expected by my young juvenile self, but not expected for my cynical adult self.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Which makes sense when we think about coming back to the idea of our personalities being formed around the age of like 7 or so, 7 to 12. Well, kids are. I mean, who's more spiritual than a kid, right? And so maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's the whole point why our personalities, because we're supposed to be like, oh, that's right. We're supposed to have fun. I mean, Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorite philosophers, right? The path of the Ubermensch, right? The psychologically superhuman is that who has a mind as a child. Lao Tzu, right? Translation, the old boy, right? And certainly somebody who just flows and just allows life to happen, because I ain't hanging on too tightly. It's not worth it. Because when you hang on too tightly, right, the Tao Te Ching has a wonderful chapter that says, when a human is born, they are soft and supple. When a plant is born, they're soft and pliable. When a human dies, they are stiff and rigid. When a plant dies, it's stiff and brittle. Therefore, those who are rigid and brittle are disciples of death. And so if we're following disciples of death, doesn't mean that they're bad, doesn't mean that we're bad, but they're going to sap our life energy. And if we find in our lives that we just need to hold on with this, death grip, this white knuckle grip, well, then we're going to give away our life energy. And either of those cases, it's being taken from us or we're giving it away. Well, the body and the mind, as a consequence, start to break down. And so what I do is I help recharge that life force, so then the body and the mind, as a consequence, heal.
And who was it who said that?
That's from the Tao Te Ching. That was Lao Tzu.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think that the whole thing that also brings to mind for me the idea of creativity and what an important role that plays in my life. And fun. When Peter first asked us in whatever module it was, 10 or 11 or something, I'm not good at remembering the numbers, but what are your top values? Immediately fun came into my mind, and creativity. Of course, when I drilled down a little deeper, they probably aren't my top ones, but they're pretty high on the list, because I think the older you get, the more you realize, why do you want to spend your time being miserable?
Yep.
Like, that's not fun.
Right.
So
Well,
I really like to have fun. And for me, fun involves creativity. It means singing and dancing around the kitchen and making up stupid songs and goofy dances and saying something I'm not supposed to say, and calling on my magician a lot of the time. And I even do that in my EMF groups. Like, trust me to say something off the wall, or that not inappropriate in a bad way, but like that you just aren't going to expect. Throwing that curveball. It's fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. And you can't dictate fun, right? Because if you could dictate fun, well, then you would dictate by the means of the dance. Well, then you're going to end up at this exact place in the dance floor. But that's not the point of the dance. The point of the dance is to wind up where you wind up, right? The point of singing is to enjoy the journey, not to finish the song. Otherwise, we would start the song with the last word and say, hooray.
Yep. I was trying to think what the last word of Baby Shark was.
Doot, 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 doot. Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be do.
Yeah. Yeah. How dare you earworm me with that? Oh, that's funny.
I know.
Baby shark. Doot, doot, doot.
Yeah, but now try next time you're thinking you want to have fun with it, just think of new words, that because practically every word you can think of will fit into that song.
Yep.
Every word do will fit do. So yeah. So
I was
that's what
working pediatric medical research up at the University of Utah when that song, really took off, and it really helped me connect. Because these kids, I was asking them for blood samples. I was asking them for nasal samples, for rectal samples. I was getting big old cheek spreaders to spread their cheeks to get pictures of their teeth. I was doing some really weird stuff, and being able to build rapport. Like, hey, this guy's weird. He's one of us. Yeah. He's silly. He's one of us. I trust him. But yeah.
Wow.
Well, this has been a whole heck of a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Any last words, anything that you would maybe like to have somebody kind of chew on as a last word of wisdom?
Yeah, enjoy it. It goes fast. That's really all I want to say. And if you really want to maximize and enjoy your life to the full, set about figuring out, not in just learning about how life works, how to become the best version of yourself, and most importantly, how to become the most authentic version of yourself, and just find out who you really are. Not who society wants you to be, not who your family want you to be, none of that crap. Just really, yeah.
If people are interested in joining the Elite Mentorship Forum, what would be a great way for them to get a hold of you?
I have a number of emails, but the easiest one to remember would be info@coriloveslife.co.uk, and Cori is spelled Cori. You can also find me on Facebook as Cori Josias. Ping me a message. I always look at my messages. I'm Yeah, I like having I like the social aspect of social media. I like the back and forth. I like talking to people. So yeah, get in touch and let's have a conversation. Really, that would be the starting point.
Okay.
Let's have a conversation. Let's see if it's a fit for you, because it
Yeah,
may not be. But if you don't have the conversation, you won't know. So two ways: Facebook, Cori Josias, or Cori info@coriloveslife.co.uk.
I love it.
That's
I love it. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for a
Thank
great
you.
conversation. Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoy hearing people's point of view, and especially those who are looking to add value, right, to the world, to their community, to themselves. And
Mhm.
yeah, thanks so much for joining me for this hour. And until next time, we'll see
Yes, and
what
thank you
saith
for
the crooked
inviting
knows.
me, oh, he of the radio voice.
Hey, thanks. I'll take that. I'll let that.
You should.
I'll let that prevent me from getting outside the door a little bit, and then I'll shrink my
I
head.
know, well, exactly, that's okay. You can always saw off the door. You can always, like, put a bomb there and blast it open
Yeah,
to get
that's
your
awesome.
head through.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, Cori. You're awesome. Keep doing the good work and keep bringing others, raising that global consciousness. And hey, together, right? We'll raise the frequency and hopefully make the world, a better place. Not because the world is improving, but because we are.
A groovier place.
Groovy, baby. I love it. All
I'm
right.
showing my age, but it's all good. That's me.
Yep.
Thank you,
I love it.
Josh. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
My pleasure, Cori. And you have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you.